Okay, we just had this study on the Patriots dynasty strategy of not trying to score too fast at the end of halves. Watch that video on our channel if you haven't already seen it. It's down there, the Patriots one. And we have a real life example from just this past season of Mike Vrabel utilizing some of that thought process here with the Patriots actually not trying to score on first down against Tampa Bay. What'd you see here?
I would say that this may have been one of the first times I've ever seen in the first half of a game a clear effort by a team to not score on purpose. So if you look at this first and goal play, Tampa has no timeouts, and Drake May basically just goes down right at the line of scrimmage. He's clearly not trying to score, and because they don't have any timeouts, New England has the option to then burn 40 more seconds. But from this moment, I think it's a very interesting spot because New England is actually losing 7-10 at this time. So this strategy would make a lot more sense if they were already winning, because ultimately by doing this, they are increasing the chances that they do not score on this drive. And there's, by some metrics, there would be a suggestion that if they had the option to essentially score, that scoring would be preferred to second and goal from the one, even after the clock running off. So it's a very unique, interesting kind of nuance. And what I would say is that it was an interesting strategy, but as this played out, it basically sort of turned into a disaster. And if they thought, okay, we've got 3 downs to get it from the one, we're going to get it anyways from second and goal to one. Now, if you watch this second down play here, you'll see they have some trouble for sure.
Yeah.
So yeah, if you pause it right there, if you start thinking, okay, where are they now at in terms of, odds of winning the game? Things are much worse now once they're facing third and goal, really from the 1.5, maybe you could say it's the 1, but they are significantly worse off from a win probability standpoint compared to if they had just scored a touchdown with a minute and 40 left. So this is, I think, a case of a team maybe getting a little bit too cute with the situation. And, obviously in a dream scenario, they don't score on first down, maybe even don't score on second down, and then they score with, 10 to 15 seconds left. And Tampa certainly has no time left to really do anything. But it's a really good example of all the people that get caught up in the sense of like, okay, they should just not score in this play, and then they can score in the next one. It's never that easy. Like there's a lot of nuance to it. And, for example, they could have gotten a false start here. They could have got a holding. Like there was some significant penetration in the backfield, and it really would have dramatically dropped their chances. So even if you just basically took, the scenario that they were facing on first and goal at the 1 and said, okay, if they hypothetically score on this play, and then you compare it to third and goal at the 1 with the amount of time remaining that they would have, it's like, we're talking at least a 10% drop in win probability. Like you're in a really tough spot. So if we then go to at this point, they're all in on the strategy. If you go to the next play, so they've let another 40 or so seconds come off the clock. And then the third down play is like, they're going to snap it around 19 seconds. And very interesting one. They actually, they barely do not get this one, but like we've talked about before, of like these strategies down here at the goal line, like you actually in many cases want to try to avoid the significant negative when it's first, second, or third down. And they almost were sort of inviting it on that third and goal play. Now they ultimately got to the half-yard line, but if you go back to the end zone view of the third down play, there's like a real world where just any of these scenarios, these blocks were missed. Like there was a player there, if you look at, on the really just one of the offensive linemen almost certainly holds one of these defenders. And like that could have been really a 10-yard swing, but he's like, you can see it. It's very blatant. He's basically tackling the guy. So that could have been a 10-yard swing. And all of a sudden you're like, I actually can't believe they did not throw the flag there. But
that's egregious.
And so like you start thinking about like how, exotic you're getting. This is a little bit reminiscent of the Texas versus Ohio State scenario where they tossed it out at the 1 and they lost 7. Now this time they did not lose yards, but you're inheriting a whole lot more risk. So say anyways, okay, so assume fine. They didn't throw the flag. You're at the half-yard line. And now you got to be thinking, if you're Mike Vrabel, like, okay, like I might have dug myself in a little bit of a hole here by not intentionally scoring on first down. They're still losing in the game 10-7. And now you're faced with the decision, 4th and goal from the half-yard line. There's 2 seconds left in the half. You've basically guaranteed that, you really probably almost certainly should be going for it just from a pure win probability standpoint. And they do manage to complete this ball. It's like a very low probability completion, but when they line up in shotgun, if you just pause it right there before the snap, if you essentially take a shotgun snap from the half-yard line and say, we're just going to throw the ball and we're going to maybe, hope our guy wins in a one-on-one situation on a corner route, it's basically turned itself into almost like a 2-point conversion type play. So I would say there are probabilities about a 50% chance of converting this. So you go from a scenario where like you're 1st and goal at the 1 and you're, essentially going to you're going to score a touchdown about 90% of the time. And just as things have played out and they've tried to get a little bit exotic, they've now dropped themselves down to dramatically lower odds of winning this game. Now this ball falls incomplete, which it very easily could have been. Like the receiver made a great play. The throw was excellent, but it was a pretty close call. They would have been arguably up to like 25-30% lower win probability than they would have been if they had just scored on 1st and goal. Now, obviously, it's not as simple as just saying, hey, we're going to score on 1st and goal. But if you intentionally don't score on 1st and goal, you're guaranteeing that you're not going to score on 1st and goal. So I think, and some people, we'll talk about at some point, the Bills versus the Jaguars faced a similar situation in the playoffs. And there was a lot of dialogue about the Bills should potentially not score and, basically try to milk the clock down, prevent the Jaguars from matching it. I think it's a highly complex situation. And this whole sequence is sort of an example of how things could have hypothetically gone off the rails. And what I would say is, yes, in a perfect world, that running the extra time off the clock is great. But, considering the score margin, considering what defense you're facing, like Tampa's always kind of been known as a pretty tough defense down, in the red zone, and with the D line's always been pretty good. They're in basically a goal line type look with, Vita Vea and some difference makers up front. And I think it's just a delicate balance. And there's a lot of moving parts. And like Mike Vrabel was asking for major, like this ball sails 1 foot higher, this is an incompletion, and Mike Vrabel's getting killed all week in the media and everything. And, they end up getting this play, and it's a huge swing and win probability for them. But ultimately, I think this is an example of like people who are at home sort of just like watching games and just assuming you can just turn it on and off and decide when you're going to score a touchdown, decide that you're going to let the clock run down to 2 seconds and then score on the final play. Like it's never that simple. And so I think ultimately this is a little bit of a cautionary tale about, how you handle some of these situations. And as we've kind of talked about with some of the other stuff that's come up, I would have been in a situation on that, say you did want to do this on the 1st and goal play, I would just sneak it on the 1st and goal play. And if you scored, you scored. But if you didn't, you're probably a half yard away. And then I would have just done the same thing on 2nd down, the same thing on 3rd down, because they really were asking for a potential 6, especially that 3rd down play, a potential very significant loss. And even here, when they ultimately do decide to throw it on this 4th down play, they're basically at the half yard line for that final play. And the conversion rate on the sneaks is very high there. You're talking like 77% or so, because in those scenarios, you're looking at a lot of the guys actually do try to go over the top on the 4th down play where there's like less. This was like the Drew Brees thing. Brady would do it. Some of these guys would go over the top on the 4th down play when there's like a higher fumble risk, but they didn't really care about the fumble risk because it's a turnover either way. But ultimately, it's a very interesting situation, like pretty cool. It ultimately worked out for them, but it wasn't without people sweating a whole lot and potentially backfiring, in very meaningful fashion.
Yeah, I don't. What do you think? I'm only getting 2 guys out here too. Like I don't. This just feels like there's a lot of ways this call could have went wrong. Like just conceptually. Yeah, you guys are covered. Like you're just cooked. Like there's not a lot of answers here.
Yeah, they definitely must have felt pretty good about this game plan on the route combination and getting this guy an inside leverage on that route. But it could have gone differently. And if it did, and nobody's open and you have whatever it is, 8 guys in protection, it could have looked, pretty ugly. And so I think it's really cool, that obviously Josh McDaniels was part of the whole Brady Belichick, dynasty, and where they were thinking about these sorts of things. And I imagine that, Mike Vrabel was also part of it too. And I'd imagine this stuff was sort of in the back of their mind in terms of how do we kind of optimize this situation. But you'd have to imagine Monday morning when they were talking about this, they're like, okay, maybe we got to be a little bit careful about how we approach this in the future.
Yeah, they white knuckled their way there. They got it, but definitely kind of risky. If you haven't watched the longer video on this whole concept, again, it's on our YouTube page breaking down how the Patriots used to go for the double score all the time. And as Ryan said, you see the lineage there pulling through here to this example. If you guys aren't subscribed to the channel, subscribe to it. We put out 3 videos a week. We got a great Jim Schwartz interview on the channel that you're going to want to check out. Appreciate you watching. We'll talk to you next time.